So we're going to stay with the first Wednesday of every month, with one exception, from 11:30 until 1 on October 12th, except for the month of October, which will meet on October 12th, which is the second Wednesday of the month. And again, that will still be 11:30 to 1. We're going to continue to meet on Zoom for the next while. Seems like it's been working for folks, but we will consider, continue to reevaluate getting back together in person. The dates and the topics are posted on the DRC website. If you go on the website under events, it has Lunch and Learn is listed there. So that's where you can find the upcoming topics. You can also find the link to prior Lunch and Learns as well. Every month we'll send an email reminder out with the Zoom link so that you'll have it. I do want to mention that the Zoom link is going to be the same for all of the meetings. So if you want to just put it in your calendar and save the Zoom link, it'll be all there for you. And as always, please complete the evaluation survey and give us some feedback on how things are going, okay? And there we go. So here's the curriculum for this upcoming year. Next month, Stephanie and I are going to lead a discussion on co-mediation and debriefs, and we'll talk, a lot about how mediators work together effectively, and have a discussion and some practice around that. In November and December, Lisa Gottlieb is going to present on compassionate communication. The first part is going to be kind of setting that up, and the second part is going to be some real exercises in practicing it. For 2023, January through June, these are the topics. I'm still kind of moving them around a little bit depending upon when folks are available. I'm still finalizing that. But we'll have one session on managing high conflict individuals and situations. I'm hoping to schedule a conversation with the magistrate, judges, and court representatives. I know folks have lots of questions for them, so this could be an opportunity for us to ask, how do you decide this, and how often do you double that landlord security fee when it's not provided in 30 days, and all those things that we hear over and over again in some of our cases. So that could be hopefully interesting, and hopefully that'll happen. In March and April, Belinda's gonna lead 2 sessions on facilitating great meetings. So thank you for that, Belinda. In May, I hope to have something on skill building, keeping the conversation going, just getting unstuck. A lot of times we talk about, when, the parties just want to throw up their hands, and sometimes the mediators want to throw their hands up as well. But kind of what are some techniques we can use to keep going and getting unstuck? And then lastly, a topic that comes up a lot is, what's the difference between a mediation, a facilitation, and peacemaking circles? So have a little more discussion about that, and that probably won't take the whole time. So include some skill building, or I'm also talking with someone about the importance of play. The work that you all do for the DRC is stressful, and it's hard and challenging. And as Centra was saying, we need to take care of ourselves. So building play into our lives is one way to do that. Any questions or comments about that so far? Oh, Greta has a good example, or a good suggestion to include a discussion about MI Resolve. And I'm hoping sometime when, just to give an update on all of the DRC programs and projects, and we'll be sure to include that. So thank you for that, Greta. Any other suggestions or comments on the agenda for the upcoming year? All righty, and I see we have Vocarfor. I'm sorry, I don't know. I know I'm butchering how to pronounce your name, so my apologies for that. I'm Gail Einhaus, and welcome to Lunch and Learn. And also, it looks like Denise Kabish has also joined us, so welcome, Denise. Okay, so we will jump right in here to the discussion of the new, hold on a minute, the new volunteer handbook. So when you do the evaluation, please, this could possibly be the most boring lunch and learn that we're going to have all year. So I would really appreciate some conversation and some feedback, you know, during this presentation. So please be as interactive as possible. And for some reason, I'm not seeing everybody, but hold on one second. There we go. Okay, I'll try to keep an eye on the chat and the participants, but if I miss anybody, please please just join in, or please just interrupt me.
And Gail, I'll watch the chat too to help.
Okay, thank you for that, Belinda. So the volunteer handbook, I have to admit, even as when I pre-joining the DRC as staff, probably lost track of the volunteer handbook. I held tight to my training manual, but may have lost track of the volunteer handbook. So I don't know how closely you all were bonded with your volunteer handbook, but anyway, it had not been revised or reviewed for several years. So we thought with new staff coming on, you know, and trying to be consistent in how we support our volunteers and how we communicate to the volunteers, that it was important that we update the manual at this time. You know, we also want to make sure that you as volunteers know that you are supported and that you're appreciated. And we want to make sure that you know where to go and what to do when you have any question or concern about any processes at the DRC, any staff, any volunteers, or just anything that you do. Like I was mentioning, you know, the work that you do for the DRC is hard. It's challenging to face the situations that you do with a neutral mind and an open heart, and you do a wonderful job at that. Some of you have been doing it for decades. Some of you are pretty new to it, but I'm sure it continues to present challenges to you. So, you know, we just want to say thank you for what you do for the DRC, and please know that you're supported and appreciated. I'm going to try not to read.
You're muted, Gail, for some reason.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay. Okay, can you hear me, Craig? Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so I'm not going to read the manual to you. I'm going to try to kind of pop back and forth between this PowerPoint and the manual. I sent it out to you with this invitation. I hope you were able to access it. I know that some of you might have had problems doing that. The manual is posted on the DRC website. Again, if you go to the Lunch and Learn section, it's posted underneath the information on today's session. We'll find a highlighted place for it to be on the website so that you can easily find it. So I'm not going to read it to you. I'm going to just try to hit the highlights here. But please interrupt me with any questions or comments that you have. So there's an introduction that you can read. When it starts getting sort of new and different and juicy is when we get to the volunteer standards of conduct. And so the idea behind the volunteer standards of conduct is to provide the ethical expectations that we have of volunteers when they serve the DRC. I would also note, as mediators, when you went through mediation training, there is a different mediator standards of conduct. Will be included in this document as in the appendices. There's a lot of similarities between this standards of conduct and the mediator standards of conduct, but this one focuses more on your role as a volunteer for the DRC. So that's kind of where the main differences are, although there are some overlaps. Sort of the first big important area of the standards of conduct is avoiding conflicts of interest. And think for a minute if any of y'all have run into situations when you had a conflict of interest in a mediation. But when you do, you're obligated to pause and possibly disclose that conflict to the other parties. Examples of conflict of interest could be you have a family relationship with this person, they're your neighbor, they go to your church, you work with them, your daughter, he's your daughter's friend. You may have used this, one of the parties as a vendor in a prior life. I've been surprised with all the mediations that I've sat in that I haven't run into my auto repair guy yet. But has anybody have any examples of a conflict of interest that they may have run into during mediation or a circle? Or I know that I have had, I've had 4. I had 2 that involved my neighbors. So that one was pretty easy to identify. I had another one where I know this was in my role as a coordinator. When I saw the individual's name, and let's say her name was Mary Smith, and I called her thinking, I don't know Mary Smith, and realized when I was speaking to her that I did know her because she used a different name in a professional setting. So, you know, those are examples of conflicts of interest, and we'll talk in a little bit about what to do if you identify a conflict of interest or if you identify any violation of the standards of conduct.
Well,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, we're really talking about potential conflicts of interest. For example, I mean, you start running into attorneys who where you've mediated and they've been the attorney for one party or another before. So you now know people and they know about them. And so it's important to disclose that, but it's, as I say, it's not saying I have a conflict of interest, but it needs to be disclosed because there may be, or so you want to know if there's any concern among the parties about your relationship.
Right, and we'll talk a little bit about when you identify a conflict, does it need to be disclosed, what to do when that occurs. And I know that, you know, you all run into using similar attorneys, you know, multiple times when you're a mediator, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to withdraw from the case. So in a little bit later on, we'll talk about, you know, what you need to do when a conflict has been identified and when it's necessary to remove yourself from the case.
Elaine's hand is up
Okay.
and Claudia's hand as well.
Elaine?
I have a question regarding some of the small claims cases in the past, which have involved some of the same personnel from University of Michigan Credit Union or some of the payroll advance companies that send the same representative every time to the mediations. And, you know, I think it falls into perhaps into the bucket of it's not a conflict or a potential conflict of interest because that's just how we work. But I have wondered if any of the defendants have ever given feedback to us that, you know, it seems like the mediators are pretty friendly with the plaintiffs or, you know, that sort of thing. I wonder if that's something that we ought to think about.
I have never heard of the other party giving that kind of feedback, but I think it is something that we should be aware of, that, you know, that we shouldn't be, presenting that familiarity with one side over the other.
And Claudia had a question or comment too.
Claudia?
Yeah, I just have a funny story on this. Small claims, I had a small claims mediation. This has been years back. This individual was suing the phone company, Comcast, and DTE. And I guess he had moved, it couldn't get his deposit back or whatever. It lasted 4 hours, and I was thinking, yeah, I have prior experience with them. I do, because I used them, but it took a long time. There were calls back to the main office. He finally got everything resolved in that mediation. It was just a funny story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Claudia. Any other comments about, yes, Margaret, you're on mute.
I was looking at the DRC website, but I'm sorry, I don't see where I can locate this handbook.
You go under, I'm not going to leave my spot right now just because I know
I'll look for
bad
it in.
things will happen. But if you go under events, do you see the DRC where it says events?
Yes.
And then you go under lunch and learn.
Okay.
And then there's a note about the today's session.
Mhm.
And it is kind of hard to see, so we'll get it more highlighted so it's easier to find. It says click here for handbook.
Okay, I'll look. Thank you. Yes, I see.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry to bother.
I'll get that bolded so it'll be easier to
And
find.
we'll ask that it gets posted in another location that's maybe more obvious for volunteering.
Any other questions or comments? All righty. Okay, the next big section is to maintain the quality of the processes, what volunteers are expected to do. And a lot of the items in this section are included in the consent to mediate form that many of you are very familiar with, that that we read all the time, but it may be kind of like that common prayer that you say that you kind of quit listening to what the words are. But this does, highlight the key points of your role and what you're needed to do to maintain the quality of the process. The first big one is being neutral. And as we all know, that is often easier said than done. I think, people know that they shouldn't advocate for a specific outcome or resolution or settlement. Kind of what I see volunteers struggling the most with is this last part of when they don't agree with an outcome, when they're just like, oh, this guy, they could have gotten a much better deal. Not that they disclose that at the time, but they might feel bad about it at the end. And I just want to say that, that's not our role to feel good about the outcome. Our role is to make sure that the parties are comfortable with the agreement and they feel good about whatever they have entered into. So we don't have to agree with them. It might not been a choice that we would have made, but just, keep in mind that we don't have to like the outcome that they have chosen, but they need to. And we can meet with them in a caucus if we have concerns that they might be entering into something that they're not really comfortable with, and just make sure that they are comfortable with it. The next one is not giving any legal or other professional information or advice. Sometimes I think this is hard for us, especially when we may be very knowledgeable about a particular topic that's being discussed, and but it's not our role to correct them or to offer our opinion on the situation, because we may think we know something and we may not, but that's not our role anyway. It's not our role to correct their understanding of law or finance or car repair or whatever it is. Let's see, of course, don't participate or encourage or allow participants to participate in unlawful activities or include them in an agreement. We talk about reporting threats or acts of violence to the DRC staff. If there is discussion of that or something that you're concerned about, be sure that you bring that to the attention of the DRC staff, and we will follow up on that. We do ask that everyone, and we've been talking about this a lot lately, about participating in the debrief process. And as I mentioned, we're going to talk about this extensively at our Lunch and Learn next week. But we do ask and expect that you be open to giving and receiving feedback, whether it's positive or constructive, to your colleagues. And then lastly, just not allow our professional or personal opinions, beliefs to impact our neutrality or obstruct the process. Again, this can often be challenging. Many times we're in situations or how a conversation may evolve that could push some of our personal buttons. I think that's a time to rely on and your co-mediator or your co-facilitator, and know that if you need to tag out and catch your breath, that you're allowed to do that. Any comments or questions on this section around maintaining the quality of the process? Okay. The next one is serving with integrity. Volunteers will not solicit personal business, including referrals from participants. Again, we won't allow our personal or professional beliefs to hinder or obstruct the process. You will meet time and task commitments, and when possible, provide notice so alternative arrangements can be made. I just want to say here that I feel like you all fault on the other extreme for this. I know so many times I have found out that volunteers have gone through Herculean efforts to make sure that they could attend a scheduled mediation. And I just appreciate your all's commitment to showing up when you say that you're going to show up. And I do want to encourage you, if you do have any schedule issues that come up, and we certainly understand how that can happen, please do not hesitate to give me or Stephanie a call. Using the co-mediator model, we're not going to be hung out there alone, and Stephanie or I can always fill in when it's necessary. But I just want to say how much I appreciate your all's commitment to showing up when you say you are. And when things come up, please do not hesitate to to let us know that. I know some of y'all have rearranged doctor's appointments or made other caregiver arrangements and that sort of things. And please just let us know, because we don't want to be a burden to you all. The next thing, don't speak on behalf of the DRC without the permission of the executive director, and not disclose your personal background. In doing so may compromise the neutrality in the process. So, and this goes for whether you're a therapist or you work in construction. Just having that extra information could make someone think that you're siding with them more than the other, or that you're more knowledgeable about the other person's position, that sort of thing. The exception to this standard is licensed attorneys. And this is something that's new in the handbook, because we never really called this out and we're clear on it. And some attorneys that are mediators would disclose and some wouldn't. But Stephanie provided us with information from the Michigan Bar Association that clarifies that attorneys must disclose that they are an attorney when they're a mediator. They must disclose that and inform the parties that they're not representing either party or giving any legal advice, and explain that they are third-party neutral. We've also included the Michigan Rules of Professional Conduct that refer to this are included in the appendix. We want you, in serving with integrity, we want to make sure that you know that we are here if you have any concerns, issues, questions about anything in your role as a volunteer, the quality of the services that you provide, the potential violations of standards of conduct, just anything. Please feel comfortable in reaching out to anyone on our staff. Like if you have an issue with me, you can call Stephanie, or you could call Carolyn or Belinda or whomever, but we're all here to support you. Any questions about that section? Okay, the next section is respecting the confidentiality of the process, and I think folks are pretty comfortable with this. Everybody does a good job of helping the participants know that the process of the mediation is confidential, that any notes that are taken during the mediation will be destroyed. But I also want to remind you that all case proceedings are confidential except during debriefs with the staff. We should not engage in casual conversations about cases. When it is necessary to discuss a case, like you're doing outreach or training, giving a presentation on the DRC, any identifying details must be changed so that no one would recognize the situation if it was one that they were involved with. Anybody have any questions about confidentiality? No? Okay, so if you feel that there has been a potential violation of the standard of conduct, the DRC, first thing you should do is call somebody on the staff and inform them of the concern. So this isn't just the conflict of interest, but if you have any concerns that somebody is not maintaining confidentiality or serving with integrity or not being neutral in their role as a mediator, any of the things that we just mentioned, please contact a staff person and discuss your concern. If a conflict of interest has been identified, like Michael and Elaine just described, just because you know somebody or that you have had a relation, worked with them before, doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be removed from the situation. In fact, I've had mediators that have been a mediator for a party that has had multiple cases with different people. So it's going to happen, and it's not that that's unprofessional, just be aware of it. And talk about any situation with your coordinator to make sure that everybody knows what's going on and whether something needs to be disclosed or not. If a conflict of interest is identified before it begins, like I just mentioned, the volunteer should discuss it with the DRC staff before the proceeding begins. If it's identified after it's already begun, like let's say during the course of a conversation, something comes up and you realize that you have a relationship, at that time, you should stop the mediation. You don't have to explain why you're stopping it at that time, and have a conversation with the DRC staff. You could just tell the parties that you're going to a caucus, you need a quick break, discuss the situation with the DRC staff, and then we'll determine how you will proceed. So there are sort of two possible outcomes of this. Depending upon the circumstances, the volunteer might need to immediately excuse themselves from the case. And we do not have to give them an explanation why. It depends on the circumstances. And depending on the circumstances, the case may be continued with the co-mediator, or it may need to be rescheduled. Again, it will depend on the situation. If it's something that the mediator doesn't need to be immediately removed from the case, the parties would be informed of the conflict and asked if they're willing to continue. Both parties would need to agree to this, and if they did, then they could continue. This would occur in a separate caucus with each of the parties so that there'd be no pressure on anybody to feel that they have to continue, and that they could make that make that decision freely about whether the mediator would need to withdraw from the case. Does that make any sense, or does that clarify anything, or no?
It confuses me.
Okay.
Because it seems, reading it strictly, let's say you're doing a landlord-tenant case and you've done 5 other cases with this particular landlord. Why? Do we go? Am I reading this incorrectly? Do I go through this process of? Oops.
Well, I would say, if I were coordinating that, if I assigned you to that case, I would probably know that you have already, been dealt with this landlord before, and we would have, be comfortable with whether you could be neutral in that case or not. I think the discussion is whether your ability to maintain neutrality is going to be impacted in that. If you had a bad experience, a bad mediation, or they had a bad experience with you, it might be one that you would not go forward with.
So may I add, go ahead, Ann. Go ahead, Ann.
Oh, hey, sorry, I had trouble with the microphone and the camera earlier. I apologize. So, are people allowed to ask for mediation from a specific mediator?
Yeah, can I jump in, Gail, and respond to both Mike and Ann? So we do not encourage for our consumers to select their own mediator, because that's just too cumbersome. And we want to be able to provide as many opportunities to the volunteers as possible. So we have had consumers to call and say, can mediator X be my facilitator? And we've said no. Sometimes consumers will ask, is it possible to get a mediator of color? And we try to accommodate that. So that's the only kind of time. And there may be some very clear reasons in our conversation with the consumer when we are talking about that, and that still is not a guarantee. So that's, I don't know if that answers your question, Ann. And to Michael's
It does. Thank you.
Okay. And to Michael's question, I think Gail is spot on. It's the appearance, you know, the conflict of interest has many forms, and it's the appearance. But we want, in the landlord-tenant situation you described, in my opinion, option 2, the parties will be notified, will be informed, not notified, but informed. Michael has, or you can, I've worked with landlord Belinda on multiple cases. We meet again. Are you comfortable with me proceeding with this one? I feel that I can be neutral and do my job. This has happened. This is before Gail, I think when Sally, during the time Sally was there, we had a volunteer who got into the mediation and realized that one of the parties was like a second or third cousin. Had not seen this person for years and years and almost didn't recognize them. But when the conversation started and the voice and, you know, just like, oh my gosh, that is my third cousin or something like that. And we had to pause and explore that. And we asked the parties, we disclosed, oh, this is this individual's third cousin. They have not seen each other in 10 years. The mediator does not know anything about the family or this dispute, but are you comfortable in proceeding? And in that case, the party said yes. But had they not, if one party said, oh no, then we would have pivoted. A staff person would have set in, maybe the other mediator would have proceeded solo. But you know, that's just an example of something that has occurred. And we suspect that as our case numbers go up and we're doing such a variety of cases, this is going to happen, and especially for those who have been in the community for, you know, years and years, and you're going to see some of the adult consumers who grew up with your kids or something like that. You know, they were on your team when you were coaching and you carpooled with them. So those things happen. Does that help you a little bit, Michael?
Yeah, but I'm thinking, let's say an attorney shows up. I'm just talking about sort of surprise. You know, there's an attorney who shows up who you know, or who's been an attorney on some other case where you've mediated. Are we supposed to pause and actually contact a staff member to discuss what to do? Or, I mean, the normal judgment would be to just jump to 2 and.
I think I would say it depends. You know, every case is unique. If you walked into a Zoom or in a real room and this attorney is there and you and this attorney have a more personal relationship, a previous relationship, this attorney was your attorney or was involved in something that you did, definitely you need to bring Gail or a staff person in to sort that out. But if this is an attorney you just happen to see, we know that family law attorneys kind of move in the same circle. It's a limited group. It's a small group. And you show up for mediation number 5 with the same family law attorney from Legal Services of Southeast Michigan. They know you, and that attorney says, hey, Mike, thanks for helping us with this case. I still would say disclose. I've worked with this attorney on other cases, but we have not discussed this one.
No, I agree with disclose. I'm just talking about procedure. Are we supposed to pause and contact the staff member?
I don't think, if it's convenient to do and the staff members are there. You know, they're setting you up. The staff members are introducing you to the case participants on paper. As they're setting you up for the case. And if it's something, you know, that's a great place to put it. You know, gosh, attorney so-and-so is going to be, you know, Joy is going to be on this case again. And last week, Joy and I, you know, hung out, went to dinner. Our relationship is more of a friendship. That might be a problem. And and Michael, when you use procedure, I don't want you to think, or anyone to think, that these are long, drawn out, I'm really talking about procedures that is 1 or 2 statements that can occur within a few minutes to sort out and figure out what to do. And my guess is that most of the time it will not be a problem. But we want to give our consumers the ability to say, not this volunteer, because of a relationship that is in the past. And that happens. That has happened. Limited, but it has happened. Some people don't want us to know their dirty laundry. Okay, Gail, I'll stop because you know I'll keep going.
Anything else? Okie doke. Okay, so the next section is on expectation, requirements, and responsibilities of the volunteer. And I'm going to skip over a lot of this part real quick. You know, we have different types of volunteers that you can read that. And I think most folks that are here probably already are volunteers. So you've completed the initial training for becoming a volunteer. And they do vary the requirements between circle keepers and mediators. We do require, when you initially become a volunteer, that you complete an internship period, which for circle keepers is completing 4 circles with an experienced co-keeper. And for mediators, observing at least 2 mediations. We do want to note a lot of people ask us about being added to the court roster. This isn't the same thing as being added to the court roster, and that's not something that we require of our volunteers, that you be on the court roster to be a volunteer, nor do we, you know, facilitate you getting on that court roster. I mean, that's kind of your task. There is some information in the manual about that, but that's something for you to follow up on. When we have volunteers that have already been trained at another center, we do require them to complete an internship period, regardless of whether they've been a lawyer for however long or they've been doing this for however long. We want to get to know them and, you know, clarify any differences in terms of how we do stuff and how they may have done stuff at their other organization. So initial training, you all are pretty familiar with this, so I'm not going to go over this, just how it varies between mediators and circle keepers. And here's the information on the court roster piece. I did want to spend a minute on that maintaining active status, because this is some new information that we're requesting of you. So, and we're doing this from a perspective of wanting to support you and to keep the lines of communication open between the volunteers and the staff and feeling supported. So we're going to ask that you read through the volunteer handbook and send us a note that says, yep, I've read it, I don't have any questions about it, or if you do, we'll set up some time and we can talk through those with you. We're asking that mediators and circle keepers each participate in 2 continuing education sessions per year, and this lunch and learn counts as one of the continuing education sessions. You can also provide or participate in advanced mediation courses that are provided through the DRC or other approved agencies. But we are asking folks to have 2 and to keep in touch with us about them, because we want you to stay connected to the organization. Also, we are asking that active volunteers mediate a minimum of 3 cases per year, and for circle keepers to sign up or volunteer for 3 cases per year. I know in the circles, you know, the volume might not be as high, and it might be hard to actually, you know, get the timing right for when you're available. But we want mediators to mediate at least 3 per year, and circle keepers to sign up for 3 per year. The idea here is if you're doing less than 3 per year, that, you know, you might be getting rusty, or, you know, just losing connection with how we do things here at the DRC. Any questions about those couple of items before I go on about those requirements? Does that feel onerous to anybody, or anybody uncomfortable with that?
Gail, can I ask, are you keeping track of who's at these sessions, or are you looking to us to keep track of what we're doing?
Yes, I keep track of who comes to the Lunch and Learns. So we'll keep track of that. And also we can run a report by mediators to see, you know, how many mediations somebody has participated in per year. So we'll keep track of that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we've been talking about debriefing a lot, and again, that's something that we want you to do to maintain your active status, is to debrief after each session. And a new thing that we're adding is to touch base with a coordinator at least once a year for kind of a debrief strategy session. We want to have a sort of a touch point just to get a sense from you how things are going, how engaged you want to be with the DRC, just any concerns that you have. You know, are you going to be out of town for half the year next year? Or you're going to be really busy with work and you know that you're not going to be able to volunteer. You want to go on pause for a bit, anything like that. So we do want to just touch base once per year. I know for the circle keepers, Carolyn and Kyoko want to make sure that that is a one-to-one conversation. For Stephanie and I, we are always going to be available to have that one-to-one conversation, but we might start it with an email just to see how, you know, just to touch base with email. And then if folks want to have a more extended conversation, we'll do that. But we're going to sort of see how that goes with the number of volunteers that we deal with. Any questions or concerns about that? Or I hope that's a good thing.
I can ask a question.
Yes, Ann?
I'm so sorry to interrupt. On page 5,
no.
section 2. Okay. On section 2.4, to respect confidentiality of the process, volunteers will. Okay, it's page 5. So the second sentence says that volunteers will not engage in casual conversation about cases. It is also related to debriefing somewhat, and also when we break out into the, what is it when we break out? Weeks, what's it called? Caucus?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that sentence, volunteers will not engage in casual conversation about cases, I think is non-specific enough that it might need rewording to say in relation to during caucus, or not have it in there, because volunteers do engage in conversation, but I think what's not added on the end of that sentence is any of this engaging of any conversation outside of the perimeters of mediation. In other words, if there's a caucus and they're talking, the mediators are talking between themselves, I think that discussion is within the perimeters of confidentiality and even debriefing.
Okay. So okay, we'll take a look at that. I don't have any word correction at the moment, but I see your point.
Just a suggestion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay. Moving right along. Okay, the next section is looking at when a concern has been raised and what we want to do when there is a concern, and how do we want to address that. So, first thing is, anytime that you have concerns, please reach out to us and know that we're here in a supportive role for you. All of us have areas where we need extra support. But what we're talking about here is if there is kind of a reoccurring issue that is having a negative impact on the process, on a mediation or a circle, we want that to be brought to our attention. And if it is brought to our attention, we will meet with the individual and talk about the concerns. Also, a lot of times, volunteers have an area that they are really struggling with in mediation, and they want some extra support. So you can always come to us if you feel that there's an area that you're stuck in, that you don't feel like you're getting better in, and we can help come up with a plan or some extra training or coaching that can help the situation. But if there's a concern raised with us, or if it's something that we have observed, we will bring it up with you and develop a plan around that. When we develop that plan, we will have goals, specific goals, things that we want to help you work on to change with a timeline. So that depending on what the situation is, it might be training, it might be coaching, it might be pairing a volunteer with somebody that does really well what it is that this particular volunteer needs some assistance with. So if there are concerns, if we observe them, know that we're going to follow up with the individual. If you have concerns, you can bring them to us, whether it's something for yourself or if it's something for a individual that you have co-mediated with. So anybody have any questions or concerns about that? Okay, so in that situation, that's somebody needs a little tune-up, and we'll help them get there and do that. We do want to note that there are circumstances when we may immediately feel the need that it's appropriate to remove someone from the volunteer roster, and that would include some pretty severe situations. For example, breaking confidentiality, and this would mean, disclosing key information about a party, any form of harassment, racist or sexist language or behavior, giving legal advice, promoting your own business during the course of a mediation or a circle, or some other significant violation standard of conduct. Any questions or concerns about that section? Okay. The next one, just Stephanie and I have this long list of, I think it's over 200 people that are on our small claims mediator list. And we know that we do not have 200 small claims mediators. So we're going to go through a little cleanup of that list. But some folks we have not heard from for quite a while. So just know that if, we've tried to reach a volunteer, that we will remove them from the volunteer roster until they reach out to us and let us know that they want to continue to volunteer. Support and training. This is pretty straightforward. I think, you know, we do offer trainings. Some are more appropriate for mediators and some are appropriate for circle keepers. There's monthly continuing education for both groups, and anybody can go to anything. You can participate in a circle keeper education session if you wanted to, and everybody is welcome to the lunch and learn sessions. Any trainings that the DRC has is listed on the website, so under the training section, so keep an eye on that. We do have the basic mediator training coming up in October, so if you know anybody that would be a great volunteer, we would love to have them. There's another section where we mentioned facilitators and large group meeting facilitators. Right now, we don't have any formal training for large group facilitators, but if that's something that you want to be available to do, let Belinda know, and she can discuss requirements with you and opportunities as well. Another training opportunity is coaching. Anytime anyone wants some additional coaching, just reach out to a coordinator and we will arrange that. The next part is on debriefing sessions, and I'm not going to go into that because you can read it, and we're going to have a whole session on that at the next Lunch and Learn. One thing that is new, and I already mentioned this as part of the maintaining your active status, is to have a yearly debriefing session with one of the coordinators. And again, that's something that we will initiate and will reach out to make sure that that happens. And now we are at the end. So here's some frequently asked questions. If there's other ones that you think we should add to here, let us know that. And then there are also some appendices with our names and our titles, some tools for debriefing. This first one is applicable to circle keepers and mediators. There's some circle keeper specific information and some mediation specific information. There's some of the forms that are used by all the courts, just for your information, and the Michigan Rules of Professional Conduct. So that's it. Any questions or comments?
Comment. Thank you, Gail, for going through that. I know that was a big presentation on your part. So, and I want to thank Gail and Carolyn, who actually worked on revising the handbook and got input from other staff, and so they did a great job in pulling this, reviewing, revising, and really comparing to what's been happening for the last several years. So thank you.
Okay, so this afternoon, thank you for thanking me, Belinda. So this afternoon, when you get the evaluation, I did not have an option for most boring lunch and learn session ever. So you can add that in the comments. But thank you all for your time and attention today. I did want to get one more plug in here before we go. Since we do have a few minutes, the Behavioral Health Mediation Services Program, it is, you know, a slow rollout. I know that several of you all have been trained in this program. Cases are very slowly popping up across the state, but if you do know anybody that receives services from community mental health and they have any complaints, please remind them that mediation services are available and free to help address complaints with service providers or to help, mitigate something from becoming worse. So just keep that in mind. And with that, anybody have anything they want to share, since we're ending early for once? Any comments or questions about the handbook or anything that's going on at the DRC or in your life or anything?